Welcome to Thrive, the podcast. Welcome to Thrive, the podcast, where I'll be talking with guests who've created extraordinary results in business and life through listening to and following through on their intuition in the face of logic, reason, and rationale, to demonstrate why your inner navigation is the most important advisor you'll ever meet. No matter what you've been through, faced, feared, or run from, Thrive is here to uplift you and give you the courage and fortitude to face your future, even when you don't feel fearless. I'm your host, Elizabeth Adams. Throughout my 20s and some of my 30s, I operated from a place of workaholism, believing that when I reached success, all would be well in my world. Coming home to myself was a journey that began with a series of synchronicities that led me to learning how to tap my intuition and ultimately gave me the tools to live a far more rewarding life. Since then, I've been helping my clients to thrive. No matter what you're up against, grief, depression, unfavorable circumstances of any kind are only ever a starting point on the way to realizing the life you were born to live. The power really is within you, and my intention with this podcast is to enable you to unlock it. Today on Thrive, I'm in conversation with my friend Anne Scott, imagination technologist. Anne left her lucrative IT career to follow the thread of her intuition in creating a far more rewarding life. It's always moving, even when we don't want to. In these moments, it can be easy to get stuck in loss and grief for what was, or in the fear of what's to come. Often life demands the letting go of what we love and have loved. When we can do so, we allow what we love to move, to grow, to evolve, to become, to teach, and to delight. Those moments are always richer when we hold ourselves gently and appreciate and celebrate what we've had the privilege of experiencing. And so in this episode, Anne is speaking on her journey to creating Evolve, a delightful experience and annual event. In supporting ourselves to move with life, to celebrate life, even when it's hard and painful, can be one of the most difficult things for us to do. And one of the most powerful ways of being able to fully grow in life is through connection. In connection where we are being seen, witnessed, and having the space to witness our own experience. This is where we reap the gold of who we truly are. Yet for many people, this isn't part of daily life or their existing relationship dynamics. So it has to be created. And we have to choose to immerse ourselves in the spaces and places where this is available. In doing so, it ripples into our own personal reality and creates transformation inside of us and around us. So this helps us to reap the very best of life, even in the challenging, hard experiences and moments that life brings to us all. For this reason, expansion is my year-long journey, where together you and I go through all the nuances of your life, and you begin to create or recreate what truly fulfills you in business and life. So if you're ready to embrace your own expansion, reach out to me via the link in the show notes. In the meantime, enjoy this sweet conversation with Anne. So Anne, welcome to Thrive, the podcast. I'm delighted to have you. I remember the first day we met years and years and years ago. You came and sat beside me in the Eric Edmedes Best Year of Your Life event. It was so long ago. I think that must have been 2006 or something. We've quite the ride since then. I remember at that time, I think you were in a corporate career. You were in technology. You were as far as I remember, quite the accomplished leader in the tech world. You want to share a little bit about that snapshot of your life?
Yes, yeah, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on to Thrive. Um, so yes, I think it was 2006. It was in my experimentation phase, or well, I think I'm always in the experimentation phase now. I've resigned myself to always exploring. But at that stage, I was working with in tech. I think I was probably working with O2 or potentially in the city with Schroders Unit Trust. Um, I'd had my own business for 20 years as a freelance delivery consultant. So my focus was about delivering business transformation. And I had a bit of a reputation of getting difficult projects done. Yeah, I was quite bullish about the way I worked. Very focused on the end result, very focused on what had to be done, the project plan, and not so focused on the human aspect of it, I have to say at that time. But when you met me, I was sort of in a phase of exploring what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I sort of got to the top of that ladder and felt that I was leaning up against the wrong wall. And that was after 25 years. I left school and I went into an IT course because I was being paid. Yeah, it was, they were trying to encourage people to learn programming and coding in Ireland in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. And I ended up sort of being in one of the first BSc programs on computer systems. So it was very innovative and it was exciting. And I'm actually quite good at maths and I'm quite good at economics and quite good, structurally at process. So it inspired me at the time. Yeah. And I liked being on the leading edge. I liked, being a little different and being a little out there. And I became a freelancer. I worked for about 7 or 8 years in actual, corporate jobs. And then I was invited to do some freelance work and I started freelancing and that opened up a lot of freedom for me. But yeah, so I got to a place though where life wasn't as inspiring as it had been when I first left school. And I also realized that I was doing something that I had been guided to, through my family structure. My family was about having a good job, about being secure, get a job in the bank or get a job in the government.
Mm. Well, I want to ask you at that time, what were your coping mechanisms as you were, experiencing that things aren't actually as good as that moment where you realize your ladder's up against the wrong wall. And by that time, it's not that easy to see at first. We don't want to necessarily see that at first, especially when we've invested so much time and energy and we've had success. It's like you were very successful in it, and that makes it even harder sometimes to see. What were the indicators and what were the coping mechanisms for you in your world?
Yeah, well, Liz, there was a lot of oscillation in that I worked very hard. I worked very hard on projects, like really phenomenal hours. And, I really liked my work. I was a workaholic. Yeah. And then when I completed projects, I went off and traveled and, I sort of been to South America, been to Indonesia, been to Australia. So I had, quite significant periods of travel. And then I would run out of money and I'd have to come back and, get back into the job front again. So that oscillation was going on. And then while I was working hard, I would say that, my main friend was wine, red wine. And so, me and a bottle of red wine and my hard work, and it wasn't doing my health any good. But having said that, I'd say the main problems were realizing that I wasn't creating what I wanted to create. Yeah, I wanted to get married, I wanted to have a family, and neither of those two things came to fruition. And in fact, I had an early menopause, which unexpectedly put me in a position of not being able to have children, even though I was sort of in my 30s at that time. So that really called me to stop and pause and went, well, what am I doing here? Is this just about working hard, traveling, drinking? Yeah, and
That's a big blow, right? That's when something that we really hold dear, that we really want in our heart, and it's not coming to fruition, it can really impact us. So what did that ignite in your life? Where did it take you?
It took me to depression, first of all. It took me to a real, place of darkness. And I do have suicidal ideation. That's always been with me all my life, in my teens. And I've had counseling, I've had therapy for depression. So, but it's familiar to me. Yeah. So I'm kind of comfortable with it. But it took me to a very dark, deep place. I was, in my late 30s, early 40s, and I just went, is this what life is about? Yeah. And I didn't want it to be about that. So there was time. There was time. It was the dark night of the soul, the valley of death. I was, there were a number of years where I was really, really struggling. Yeah, but I followed the light, and the light was kind of, curious things. Like for instance, I got a hit that I wanted to go back and study again, and so most people thought that I would do an MBA, that I would do an MSc in product management. I'd already got a degree in marketing. I had a degree in, computer systems, and I decided to go back and study anthropology, because I just went, I don't want to go up. I don't want to keep climbing up this ladder that's up against the wrong wall. And I was always curious about the arts, and I didn't want to go back and do a BSc. So I basically said, I'm going to do a master's program, and I'm going to get into a master's program. And that's what I did. I got into a master's program in anthropology without a BSc in anthropology. I actually blagged my way in.
So you're a real creator already. So where did intuition come into view for you? Like what happened there? Like you're on the path of anthropology. You must have caught sight of something.
Well, I mean, I just kept following those little glimmers, and part of that was starting to explore, going back to basics about what I was good at. Yeah, so I went and had a few coaching sessions with different people. I did the Myers-Briggs profiling. I'd actually done some career counseling in the 80s, and I went back to the notes I had around that. And the counselor at that time, I mean, I was, sort of 27 or something, and I went into her, and I was doing a programming job in Ireland, and I asked her, so who am I supposed to be? She said, well, I've looked at your notes, and I can see what you're good at. And she said, but you're here to save the world. And I was like, I've paid all this money to this woman, she's going to tell me that my job is to save the world. That, like, I'm in an IT programming career, and you're telling me I need to save the world. So at that, when I was 27, I just kind of dismissed it. And I didn't know her very well. She was I actually rated her as well. So I couldn't understand, I said to her, I can't do anything with this, what you're telling me. But 20 years later, I started being more curious about that and what that meant. And one of the things that was revealed to me through the personality testing was that my primary mode of awareness was intuition. Now, I'm working in an IT, computer orientated, process orientated, very rational world. I come from a very rational family. And I was just really curious about this because it was really high up on the scale. And not long after I did that test, I got an email, and the email said, do you want to become a master of your intuition? That was the title on it. I still remember it. And I was like, whoa, and it was before we knew about algorithms,
reading my
listening
email.
to us. Yeah, before we knew about that, yeah. And before we were even doing much in the way of emails, this was like 2005, 2006, 2007, yeah. So that piqued my interest. And that's the second time we met. It was Darren Eden, and I met you again at the Darren Eden program, and I did a weekend with Darren. I thought it was completely out there. I thought it was completely ridiculous. This idea of making things up, being in your imagination, really freaked me out. And I signed up for the next level, and I worked with Darren for 4 years.
That's the really interesting thing, isn't it? That our rational mind will make so many judgments about things, and we'll go into resistance. It's like, no, this is just madness. I remember being in that weekend, and going, I'm in a room with a load of weirdos. Like, what the fuck is going on? Why am I here? And then when you go through the structure and you're learning it, and then realizing, oh my God, I can feel these symbols landing in my arms. Like, what is going on? And you suddenly tapped into a whole nother world. It was really profound. It really shifted the trajectory of my world at that time. But I do remember coming away from that first weekend steeped in depression, because what I'd received intuitively seemed so impossible to me. It was like, no, I could never have that. That's not possible for me. How could that happen given where I'm at? Like, that's just crazy. And then the breakdown that you have is like, it's impossible. I must be crazy to even want it. That's the way it shook me at that time. So you went on to start in terms of the year long at that point. And yeah. So what did you learn about yourself through that process?
I think it's really interesting, Liz, because you shared, how it impacted you. And I think how it impacted me was it didn't make sense. Yeah. So it was the biggest thing I had about that weekend was none of this makes sense. It doesn't make sense that, I'm all about love. It doesn't make sense that I'm here to transform the world. It just doesn't make sense to me. I didn't kind of go, oh, I don't think I can have that, or is it possible? It was just, it didn't make sense. And and so I stepped into a world of not making sense. Yeah. And I continue to do these courses alongside my IT career. And I'm very, grateful, like, because one of the things that I didn't have a problem with during training was money. Yeah. Because I had money. Yeah. I was doing, I was working in a corporate world. I was getting good money on contract, and I was able to really throw myself in. And I did the first year and I still didn't understand what it was all about. Yeah. People
Kept
talk
you
to me
in
about
there because there's so many people that would just say, this does not make sense. I'm out the door. Like, there's no way. But
yeah.
you kept going. There was something there that kept you in it.
Yeah, I think it really brought me back to my childhood imagination. Yeah, and imagination is probably my thing here. It's like this idea that I have symbols and images, and I see things when people walk into the room, or I get a sense. I don't feel vibration or frequency so much. People talked a lot about that in the first year of the course, and I didn't understand that. Yeah, but if I was sad, I wouldn't feel sad. I'd get a picture of Eeyore. I was like, oh, there's an Eeyore somewhere over here. Yeah. And I go, oh, I must be sad. Yeah. So I was quite disconnected probably from my feelings. I probably still am. Yeah. And there's probably reasons for that in my upbringing. But what I realized is it doesn't matter because this information was there for me anyway. And I could just take that information that I would normally dismiss, like I'd walk into a room. I remember a really good example of this is I was running a project for O2, and I was the project manager, and I had one day to get 50 or 60 people all on page with a project. And I walked into a room, and all I saw was the beginning of a sailing race. And if you know how, when people sail, there's a line that they have to cross, and all the boats do whatever they want to do. Yeah. But they've all got to cross the line, not before the gun goes off, either as the gun goes off or afterwards. Yeah. So, and everybody is lining up. And this was the image that I saw. And at this time, I just started this training. So I just went, I'm going to go with this. So I framed up the whole day based on that. And I went, everybody in this room, you all know what you do. I don't know what you do. You guys are the experts. Yeah. We finish here at 5 o'clock, and everybody needs to be across the line. You need to have everything you need to know to get this project off the ground. Yeah. And that's how I framed up the meeting. And it was wonderful. It was awesome. I didn't have to control anything. I'd inspired everybody, to talk to who they need to speak to, to get the information they needed to get, and so it really opened up my world to the fact that there was a whole set of information that was going on around me that I was ignoring, but that actually enriched my experience and
And empowered
eased.
others. Empowered others
Yeah, yes,
to have
exactly. It opened up
agency.
the space. It opened up the space for people to go, I'm autonomous here. I've got agency. I've got sovereignty. I know what I do, as opposed to me trying to control the space and trying to tell people how they need it to be and how it needed to be done.
Yeah, awesome. That's such a wonderful addition to any business, isn't it? At the end of the day, especially with those power dynamics start to play out between team members and hierarchical structures in organizations, it really drains the productivity and the life force of the people who already know exactly what you're saying. They know it. So that's awesome. So you've started, you've got into this contract, you've seen it applied in your practical career life. What started happening for you on a personal level as you were moving through this?
Yeah, on a personal level, I realized I didn't want to continue in that world, or at least I didn't want to continue at that time in that world. I mean, I actually think business is awesome. It's wonderful. And I think it's a force for change. Yeah. But I didn't have the capacity, the resilience. I didn't have the skills at that time to be the person to do that. Yeah. I mean, I feel differently about myself now. Yeah. And I'm very inspired to be in the world of business and to work with leaders, and to work in a spirit-led, imaginative way. But what started to happen is people asked me about coaching. So I started coaching people. People started paying me for coaching. Um, I did actually take a contract, very, very interesting. I don't want to take up too much time with you, but I did actually take a contract I got true to take, because I'm just sitting with what's true. And you and I have spoken about this, Liz, this idea of what's true. Now, it took me a long time. I still don't always know what's true, but I get a hit of something and I go, oh, follow that. So I took this contract, and it was with Sky, I think, and it was 3 days a week. And I was like, great, this is perfect for me. So I went in, they had no computer. So normally I would sit around and wait for a computer, but I got intuitively to use my computer. I went in, had meetings. I got intuitively to document everything, which normally I wouldn't do. I could just feel the part of me that just goes, I'll wait till they give me the computer. I'll wait till they set me up. So I documented everything, documented all the meetings, very easy job. And I was there about 2 weeks. And I actually, one of the reasons why I needed the money was to complete my leadership training with Darren. And I was there about 2 weeks when the guy came into me and he said, in fact, sorry, I'll stop. That morning, I did my morning practice and I got myself on a beautiful beach, Caribbean beach, coconut trees, sand, sea. And my current reality wasn't that. I was getting on a tube to go to Hounslow. So I was like, wow, that's my vision. That's my current reality. There's a big gap here, yeah? And I just went, well, choose the beach, choose that freedom, choose that life, so I went into work, and the guy came to me and he just said, look, I'm really sorry, but we took you on before we actually got approval. And so we cannot honor that contract. But what we are going to do, what we are going to do is we're going to pay you double. So I got paid exactly the amount of money I needed to pay for my leadership course. And that was the last. I handed over everything because I'd prepared everything. I'd been on top of everything. And it was the last IT contract I ever did.
So did that lead to the beach and the coconuts?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, it has done, as you well know. Was subsequent, not immediately. I did do some traveling, and I went to New Zealand, and and I've always traveled. Travel has always been in my life. But about 3 or 4 years ago, post COVID, I was in Greece, which is a place where I've created a bit of a relationship with.
Well, before we go there, though, let's go to the journey that you had, because it wasn't always smooth sailing. You'd gone from this really high-powered, well-paid contract work, and then at some point you found yourself selling vegetables for Abel and Cole. Right.
I did.
So here's the weird thing about following your intuitive lead, is that sometimes what it puts in front of us in our rational mind does not make any sense. In fact, I would go as far as to say we don't want to do it most of the time.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit, because that can be very confronting.
Yes, and it was a time when I had been doing some coaching. I wasn't actually earning enough money to really sustain myself, and I was paying for a coach.
So you'd let go of these. So after this contract, you kind of let go of the contract work. You decided to step out of that world to follow the vision of the beach and the coconuts.
I did.
But where it led you was, well, first of all, you're going to be doing these other things.
Yeah, and one of the first messages I got was get a job. And I was like, whoa, this is a year of me coaching, and it was like, get a job. And so I went back I went back into the corporate world and started asking people for work. Now I'd left, I think maybe it might have even been 2 years. Yeah. And it's a very fast moving world, the technology world. So it's like, no, there's no jobs there. And intuitively, I got to look at TNT, which is an Australian Aussie magazine, in London. And I opened it up, and there was this like 100% commission job selling vegetables, organic vegetables. And it just jumped out at me. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Now, well, I've got to go and knock on doors and ask people if they want to buy vegetables. And if I don't sell anything, I don't get anything. Yeah. So, but anyway, it just was true for me to go to the interview. So I went to the interview, and I'm in my early 60s now, Liz. This was sort of like 15 years ago. And my interviewer was 21, 22. Yeah, really young guy, beautifully decorated in tattoos, beautiful looking man, young man. And we started talking, and he introduced an exercise. It was a group interview. He introduced an exercise that you and I would be very familiar with from our alchemy training, called the lifeboat exercise. And I just finished alchemy. I just finished that training. And everything in me, it's just all these like messages. I was going, you've got to take this job. Yeah. And they had great fun, and I was offered the job, and I just had to surrender to the fact that there was just too many coincidences, too many little messages saying, this is the work you need to do. And it didn't help that people around me said, this doesn't look good. You're supposed to be a creator. You're supposed to be a coach, and you're taking this door-to-door job selling vegetables. I absolutely loved it. I got to see all over London. I met the most amazing people, going, knocking on doors, meeting people, but also the other people who are working with me, artists, creatives, because this is wonderful work. You just showed up, you did your shift, and you went home. Yeah, and you got paid. There was no responsibility, there was no planning for tomorrow. You even could choose the number of shifts that you did. It served me to get to Africa, where you and I, did some training with William Whitecloud. It served me to learn a lot about sales. It served me to learn a lot about no's. Knocking on doors, consistently being told no, 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 and then being able to use the techniques that you and I know about to be able to shift my consciousness and to be able to change that. And it was wonderful timely. Yeah. As a result of, I met somebody who was looking for somebody to help them in sales. And not only that, but I think you and I had a conversation and you saw me doing sales. And I ended up working with, Ryan Pinnick and Super Genius. And, over the space of 2 to 3 years, the two of us, I mean, Ryan's a great salesperson and I'm in the back end talking to people on the phone and talking to people about the work that we did. And it completely amplified that business. Yeah. So I ended up working in that business for 3 years, which,
Wow.
really supported me and paid me money and gave me visibility as a coach. And then in 2017, I chose to step out of that and go back into, creating more of my own business and doing my own coaching. Yeah. And then COVID came along and we all got locked up. And
But by then you'd found the beach. You had found the beach.
I
That's
had, I had, because again, another intuitive hit I got was to go to Corfu and do a course in Corfu. And it was somebody that I met who does creative work as a musician. And I did some work with them and I just went, no, this isn't for me. This isn't really for me. And at the end of it was a 1-day workshop. He just said, look, I'm going to Corfu if you want to come and do this course in Corfu. My rational mind said, well, why would I do this course again? And my intuition said, you got to go to Corfu. And it was one of those things where I actually, again, was so embarrassed I didn't tell anybody. I booked it and didn't tell anybody. And I remember it was the first week in August. And I really didn't like the idea of going to Greece, like with the temperatures that high or anything like that. But I followed through and it completely opened up Corfu, which has become a second home, beautiful community of people there, wonderful group of friends. And I've been basically running events there since 2019.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the complete luxury of joining you in 2022 for your Evolve event. And it was just the most luscious retreat because not only was I surrounded by people I knew, but the setting, you had an outdoor venue overlooking the ocean in the mountains with all the lush greenery and beautiful colored flowers that is so native to the Greek landscape. And you curated all the artists and musicians every evening to come and perform and, deliver poetry and music. And we had a club night and everybody from the island came and the atmosphere was electric. It was such a fabulous retreat. And of course, in the morning you get up and you go to the beach and you have your breakfast on the beach. It's just all of it was just luscious to the T. And you're running it again. You're going to be doing it in June this year. But let's talk a little bit about the creation of it, because when we're creating these things, obviously, you've created it from your imagination. You created it without, and this is the thing about creating, because you have to follow what's unknown and what's unseen. Because if you already know it, then it's not anything new. You're just relying on something from the past. So it takes a lot of courage to follow through or start, because you don't know where it's going to take you, what it's going to bring. But you actually got to do this from a coconut, a message from a coconut. Now, most of us in business would just go, that is whack. Like, you are on crack. That would be the answer for most people. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned to you, Liz, and as you know, part of what we do, I guess, is we create spaces to cultivate intuition. So we have morning practice and intuition and, sit and journal and that sort of thing. So that's a regular practice of mine. And I was in Corfu and I'd run a couple of retreats, 8 or 9 people, very traditional retreats. People come and, had a nice time. And I'm sitting on this beach, and I suddenly have a sense that there's a coconut in my awareness. It's not like I see a coconut; it's not real coconut. I mean, and Greece doesn't have coconuts. Yeah, it has olive trees. So so I had a sense of this coconut, and I just kind of went, "Oh, what are you? You know, who are you? You know?" And it said, "Well, I'm called Evolve." And I went, "Oh, okay, cool. What's Evolve?" Yeah. It said, "Well, I'm an event." And I went, "Okay, so why are you talking to me?" And it said, "Because you're going to run it." And I'm like, "Okay." And I said, "What kind of event?" They go, "Oh, a big event. You're going to get everybody involved in the community. You know, it's like transformational event, take people on a journey to their hearts." And I'm like, "Yeah, right, okay." And so where's this going to go on? You know, I kind of was like being a bit, you know, having this sort of inner dialogue. Obviously, it's my inner dialogue. Nobody can see me. I'm not speaking to myself or anything. It's all in my head. And it just pointed up the hill to the top of this, you know, where you've been, you know, this beautiful venue, which I'd never been in. I knew it was there, and said, "You're going to be up, it's going to be up there." And I went, "Okay." Now, at this point, Liz, one of the questions I guess that we've learned to ask is like, what's the obvious action? You know, well, what's next? You know, so that's great. I've got this imaginative sort of vibe. I buy into this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know if I'm the right person to do it. You know, I don't feel particularly confident, you know, teaching and facilitating, and I never have really. Um, and it just said to me, go to the venue, go and talk to the guy who runs it. Now, I was in Corfu for a number of weeks, and I attempted to go to the venue twice or three times. Yeah, I attempted to approach the guy who ran the venue, and I turned around and went away. Yeah, so did they, you know, like talk about the you know, the call to adventure, and you know, refusing the call. Yeah. And eventually I went up to this guy and said, "Look, I'd like to talk to you about something. I believe you hired the venue." And he said, "Cool, come over on Friday morning and we'll have a coffee." So I went over and we sat on the step of his house, very relaxed. Corfu's very relaxed, as you know, yeah. And he said, "So, you know, American guy, you know," he says, "So tell me." And I said, I just took a breath and I said, "Well, I was talking to a coconut." And he goes, "We're doing it." Whatever it is, we're doing it.
Oh, that's
And
so good. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and and he was beautifully supportive. It's an alternative community, so very spiritual community, and my, you know, the fact that I had imagination was very welcomed, and we had a lovely conversation about it, and everything was so simple, so straightforward. Originally, yeah. But you asked about intuition and following through, yeah. And
Yeah.
within about 4 weeks of me following through and paying the deposit, a scandal erupted around the venue, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody cancelled their events for the following year. And my coconut kept telling me not to do that. So I didn't cancel, and I didn't cancel, and I didn't cancel. And as the guy who ran the venue decided to leave the venue. He decided to rent it out and handed it over to somebody else. And he said, "The only condition is you have to take Evolve. You have to
Mm.
take Evolve." Because I had continued to you know, I continued, I guess, to be supportive,
Yeah,
not
yeah. Well, you
necessarily
held
been
the
on either.
tension, didn't you? You held that
Yeah,
tension, and that's what happens when we go for something. There's going to be a stake in the ground, and it's going to cause tension in us, and we
yeah,
want to resolve it. So usually we'll choose the path of last resistance, and that looks like canceling something. But to hold the tension and to not go down that path of least resistance, to keep on staying with the vision, to keep on choosing it regardless of all the noise around us, especially circumstance. You know, circumstance can be loud as fuck. It's not great, you know, when we're in it. It feels awful. And the trick is always to just stay with our end result, no matter how messy and how uncomfortable. And you know, the desire to quit can be really high at that point. Yeah. So I think that's what you're saying about sticking with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I am, and it's also, I mean, it's very interesting because, you know, you and I have been doing this work for quite a long time, and you know what I get is there's a practice and there's a mastery that comes. You know, you start to realize, you know, what action is true. You know, what's true in the moment. Yeah, we've got an end result. Yeah, I had an end result of this. You know, being in this venue, having a group of 30 or 40 people, you know, integrating with the community, and it looked very, very impossible. Now, my rational mind would have had a very different approach to that. You know, it would have had a project plan. It would have maybe, you know, I would have had to talk to people a lot about it. I would have had to work things out. And just when I asked myself, is it true to cancel this? I just got the answer no. And then I was like, well, what's true to do? Nothing. What's true to nothing? And I do this with Taylor Rourke, as you know, and Taylor is a client of mine, and I invited him in, and he just went, well, I'm not getting any energy to come in here. And there was a, but he said, I'm curious. And then one day I just said something like, the coconut says go. And he goes, okay, we're going to go. And we were in. And so there's a hanging with the tension, and there's a moment of moving. Sometimes hanging with the tension is doing nothing. Sometimes it's taking action, like going and speaking to that guy. And there was a lot in the creation of that. Yeah.
There was, I remember, because you had been there for a number of years leading up to this. And during that time, you'd cultivated relationships with the musicians, with people on the island, with the people who essentially became our evening entertainment most of the time, and they had all the contacts and connections in the community who and it populated the evening festivities, as it were. It wasn't just a retreat, it was a festival in a way. It was its own mini festival. So it didn't happen like instantly. There was a period of cultivating, but you didn't know you were cultivating that at the time. It was just you pulled on those resources. Yeah, it became obvious.
Absolutely. And that was year one. And year two was very different. It was a much smaller event. We couldn't get the venue that we wanted to get. So we created a very different event last year. And we've now got a different venue again this year. And so we're in year three, and it's still evolving. Yeah, it's called Evolve, and there's an evolution in it. Now we're very clear about the fact that it takes people. It's designed to take you on a journey to rediscover your heart. So for me, I realized that we get in the rush and tumble of everyday life, and maybe we go, what do I love today? I'll have a coffee. Or what do I love? I'll have a massage. But actually, it's a week where I get to cultivate that. I personally get to go and say, hang on a minute, let me spend some time with my heart. Let me look at what wants to emerge. Let me understand, and be tender and compassionate about the part of me that is afraid to do that. Yeah. And then in the sunshine and in the space of Evolve, in the beautiful venue that we have, in the support from all the people around, it's like an opportunity to open up into your heart, open up into what it is you really want to create. So that wasn't obvious to me in the first year. That's what we were doing. That's only become obvious this year. So is it a festival? Yes. Is it a gathering? Yes. Is it transformational journey? Yes. Yeah. Is it it's sort of all these different things at the same time, and I get that it will continue to evolve, and it's about serving people who want to kind of go on that journey, or maybe they're in transition, maybe there's some change going on, maybe people just go, hey, I want a great holiday, and I'd like that holiday to be beneficial to me, and so they get to come along, they get to explore what it is they want to create. There's no obligation, no right way, no way you have to be. People can come to yoga in the morning if they want to, or they can go to the beach. I mean, the only thing that we ask is that people join us for breakfast and that they do the morning workshop, because that's where we get the opportunity to reflect with each other and do some exploration and journaling. And then, the afternoons are your time. You can go on the beach, you can, hang out in the olive groves, you can go back to your accommodation. And the evenings, we do something that's kind of fun and interesting in every evening, and people have the opportunity to actually show up and even perform. Like the first year that we were there, we had a resident musician, we had a resident artist, we had a resident writer, and all of those people showed up and contributed to Evolve. Our resident musician ended up on stage and did some beautiful numbers with a group of 6 or 8 local musicians. And that we want to give back to the community. We want to serve, and we want to. It's not just about bringing all of us in and bringing in people from outside. It's about serving and supporting people who choose to live in this environment. Yeah, and some of these people are choosing to live off grid. They're choosing to live outside the system, educate their kids, homeschooling, that sort of thing. And it's a very rural community. It's a very small resort. And in the winter it becomes a very quiet space. Yeah. So we want to serve and support people and support the community. And we want to give back as well. I mean, we're 1% for the Planet member. So 1% of our sales go to a local charity, a Greek charity. There isn't anybody, unfortunately, on Corfu who's registered as a 1% for the Planet partner, but we do give money. I think last year we gave it to the turtle conservation. Yeah. The year before we gave it to, I think, tree planting, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So, but all of that has evolved imaginatively. That has just become like, oh, be 1% for the Planet member. Approach this person and ask them, will they run the music? Will they create a concert? Will they work with musicians and create a concert? And even the week that we do it is solstice week. That wasn't planned, but what a beautiful week to do this. The peak of the year. The summer solstice. We get an opportunity to celebrate, to do cacao, to have a ceremony, and to really open ourselves up to what wants to come through to us.
So talk a little bit about cacao, because might be that listeners are not so familiar with these types of practices and the ceremonies and what these bring. And yeah, tell us a little bit about cacao.
Well, first of all, I would say I'm not an expert on cacao at all. But Corfu probably opened me up to a lot more of that, because I'd originally gone there and spent a couple of years there. And I met a lovely woman, Sasha Heath, beautiful yoga teacher who has supported us every year. And I really, valued Sasha, and I actually stayed in her business. She had a bed and breakfast business. I stayed there and I ran my first 2 retreats there. And Sasha introduced me to cacao and suggested it as an opportunity. She worked with 2 other musicians. Now, my understanding of how, first of all, is it's not an illegal drug, yeah, but it is. It contains, I don't know the actual technical name, so I can get some information for you, but it contains, as we probably all know about chocolate, it opens us up to, it's a heart opening elements in it, yeah. And so it was just so ideal from what we were doing. We just went like, oh, we're all here about heart opening, yeah. And Sasha suggested cacao, so we had a cacao ceremony, and really what it is an opportunity. I think we do it on the Tuesday evening of our week. It's an opportunity to gather together. The way this particular ceremony is run, there's music. There's a number of musicians from the local community that play music. They melt the cacao, they stir it all up in a big pot, and then basically everybody gets a little cup of what looks effectively like hot chocolate. Yeah. It's more bitter than hot chocolate. Yep.
Yeah. And I was going to say,
go on, you share with me.
No,
yeah.
I was going to say, once we've had it, we each can go back and then we dance.
Yes. Then we dance, and you can have a little bit more, but actually it's very interesting. I mean, it again, different people have different sensitivities. Some people can drink a whole cup of it and it doesn't do much for them. Yeah. Other people take a few sips and they kind of really feel like opened and, quite opened and receptive. So it's just a little bit of cacao. It just opens us up. This beautiful environment that we just relax into and we just enjoy. And it just, what I love about it in a way is it's just an opportunity to sit and be with people, and then to get up and dance. Yeah, there's music, there's an opportunity to dance, and there's a real softness in the evening. It's not like an wild ecstatic dancing. It's not like a wild DJ night. It's a very soft, heart opening opportunity. And somebody might just want to sit and receive. They might just want to sit and just feel the ground and just feel the opening in their bodies. It's very, very free. It's like there's no way that anybody has to be. And that particular ceremony is very beautiful, because we hold it so that if somebody wants to dance, they can dance. If somebody wants to be on their own, if somebody wants to cry, yeah, that they can do that. Yeah, and that's really important for us and for Evolve, that everybody can have their own journey. So we start with our theme that everybody is a heart. Yeah. And on our first evening, we recognize that we each have a heart, and we recognize the people who are in the space, and we just acknowledge that we're all here to discover the deepest parts of ourselves, and that we're all powerful. Yeah. And that by doing that, we can create a space that allows all of that to come through. Yeah. Powerful space. Yeah. And the cacao ceremony is a real culmination of that, a real opportunity for people to sink into and relax. Yeah. So
it turns out that career counselor who told you many years ago that you were here to change the world was the tapped in and tuned on and, or tuned in and tapped on, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think she probably did use the word change the world. I think when I was sharing earlier, I said save the world, but I think that was my, where I went to with it is like my reaction to what she was saying. But yeah, and the anthropology took me to that as well, because anthropology opened me up to human behavior. Yeah, and it opened me up to the fact that, the world isn't as I think it is. Yeah, that the way to do things isn't the way I think it should be done. I was a project planner, and people agreed to do things, and if they didn't do things when they said they would, I couldn't understand it. Yeah. But anthropology opened me up to the fact that, like, oh, if somebody sees the world, we all see the world in a different way. So therefore we all have different experiences and we all have different journeys. So everything has brought me to this place of going, well, if I change myself and I engage with my imagination and allow my imagination to inform me and guide me to my dreams, then why wouldn't I work with others and serve others to do the same? And I get
Yeah.
that's what we do. We change the world one person at a time.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, that narratives in society about saving the world and changing the world, and it's so much simpler than we've been perceiving it. It's really about the fact that when we make our own inner shift, we impact and allow and create the space for other people to go on their own shift, and it has a domino effect. So it always starts with us. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for joining me. I'm delighted to share this with everyone who listens to this podcast. And what's the best way to sign up for Evolve? And also,
Ah,
let's talk about the dates because it's in June, isn't it?
it's in June. It's from the 16th to the 22nd of June. So it's a 7-day event. The best way is to sign up through our website, which is www.evolvethejourney.com.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll provide the links, I guess, in the
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the podcast. Yeah, I'll
Super.
send you the links. If anybody wants to have a chat, I can
Yeah.
also provide a link so that people can book a short chat with me. Because I appreciate that people may not want to come to something that might feel quite confrontational to come and go on a journey to your heart with somebody that you haven't met. Yeah, we're listening to me here on the podcast, but so if anybody wants a personal conversation about it and whether it would suit them and whether it would work for them, I'll send a link and people can book time in my diary.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll put all of that info in the show notes.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's been great to be here and to be part of this inspiring podcast, because that's what this is. It's just an opportunity for people to be inspired and go, oh, I wonder what it means for me to go on my
Mm.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This podcast is really about, choosing our intuitive path, choosing our soul-led path, even when we've had challenges and obstacles. I think the thing is, we can experience life in a way that it feels as though we have no choice in the matter and we have no agency. And even if we have the, the surface level of success in life, we don't necessarily get the depths of fulfillment, I'd say, the depth of fulfillment that we can create when we have the opportunity to receive life in a completely different way. So that's what Thrive is really about for
Yeah.
listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the superficial level of success can be quite addictive and hard to let go of. Yeah.
Yes, it can. And then you realize once you've got the success that you feel empty and unfulfilled because obviously success is a combination of many factors, and those
Mm.
factors are about the cultivation of those factors, not the instant wins that we tend to go for in our world today. So there's a lot to it. The purpose of the podcast is to share the journey with people so that they can hear that we're out here doing it. It might be scary. It might raise attention. It might be very unconventional, but it's a fulfilling way to live.
Yeah. And come join us. Come join us
Yes,
on the journey. Yeah.
in the
Absolutely.
sunshine, in the heat, by the beach.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd love that. I'd love that.
If you'd love to go to Evolve, visit the show notes. You'll be able to get £100 off the ticket price when you mention Thrive the podcast by sending Anne a message. I'll leave the details in the show notes. And if you'd love to contact me, also visit the show notes where you'll find all my contact info. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for listening.